Hello malt mates, hello whisky fans, I'm Ralphie, this is the Whisky Bothy, and this is review number 1071, and it's the last of a short 4-part series on small, new, young distilleries. And I'm going to introduce to you a very recently established distillery brand which has bottled its first product. It's still young whisky, but I have high hopes for it. It's the Isle of Harris distillery, and the bottling is called the Hearach. The Hearach, by the way, is the name given to the people of from Harris. Harris, if you're going to look out for it on a Scottish map, is in the Outer Hebrides, which is a broad line of land that runs down the northwest coast of Scotland. It is far north. It is relatively remote, even from the rest of Scotland. I have been on Harris several times, and as a destination to really get away from it, into a treeless and stark environment, perfect. It's also pretty good for surfing, because Harris is abutted and adjoins the Isle of Lewis, and the two islands, well, the two environments, are straight onto the Atlantic Ocean. So you not only you get great surfing breaks, but the water's clean and the beaches are not crowded. Talking of the beaches, if you get a Harris beach on a sunny day, you're getting the same experience as if you were in the Caribbean. It can be absolutely wonderful. But a word of warning, if you're going anywhere near Harris, take your raincoats, and if you're going to use umbrellas, make sure they're really strong ones, because the wind never stops blowing there. Anyway, this whisky is still in its container. Why is this? Because I'm not really bothering with containers anymore. I think they're superfluous, but there's always the exception that breaks the rule. And this is it, because there's a certain amount of intelligent design gone into this. Although I really don't know if it's necessary for them to continue to use this sort of packaging. But here we go. I'll open it up for you and you can see for yourself. So the bottle's inside. Rather than a standard box, you have basically a folder. You've got your magnet in here, you open it this way, you turn it round, there's the whisky, you open it up, so you're basically getting something akin to an origami fold out. Right, so I've dropped something, here it is. The whisky bottle mat, or you could use it for your whisky glass. It's one of these little things that is actually genuinely useful. There's also inside the packaging a fairly extensive little pamphlet which gives you an introduction, importantly, to the environment of the whisky, the authenticity of the location, what we call the terroir. I think this is quite important, but it's incomplete, and I want to add that it really surprises me with all this intelligent packaging and all the rest of it, yet they're not telling you on the label of the bottle that it's unchill filtered and natural colour. Now, in my opinion, this is a major oversight that the Isle of Harris distillery really needs to address. Because I know for a fact, we all know for a fact, that people are far slower, more deliberating and more conscious of the quality of whisky they are choosing to buy, and whether it be a big corporation or a little small distillery, they're increasingly disregarding the delivered narrative, no matter how sincerely it is done. People do not have the money, People are cost conscious like never before for very good reason, and therefore any distillery that's going to do a little bit of ostentation, and this does cost money, has got to be mindful that they can't over premiumise the price in their whisky, and therefore over presentation can actually undermine their net return as a business. I'll leave it at that. I've said what I wanted to say. Another problem I have with the bottle is, as you can see, it's arty. It's unique design. When you look at this, it doesn't look like any other whisky bottles, and we're seeing a trend with this, by the way, and a very good comparison is Isle of Raasay and their unique, what you would call organic sculpted bottlings. But the way you've got to watch is when you have a bottle which is square but also rounded and has a very narrow base, that when it's sitting in a counter and being left alone, it's fine, it's going to sit there. But as soon as it gets nudged, it falls. Not only that, but if it's rolling, it's too easy. It's the sort of bottle the owners are going to see breakages. Because the base is narrow, it'll get nudged, someone will pick up, they'll put it down, they've had a few drinks. It's not an ergonomically safe bottle. How about the whisky? %46%, non-age statement, from the Outer Hebrides. That's natural colour. Don't let the experts tell you otherwise. With experience, we get to spot the signs of artificial colouring. Fake tan. This, no. You're looking at this, it could be white wine casks, but probably first fill ex-bourbon casks, judging by the creaminess, the relative maturity at such a young age of this whisky. First thing I notice is how well made it is. This is delightfully clean, fresh spirit in the same vein as the whisky in my last review, which was Loch Lee. All credit to the new distilleries. The quality, I'm finding pretty consistently, the quality of the new make spirit in terms of not just being distilled properly, but actually delivering flavour at the same time, is more reliable than the corporate multinationals who are continually imposing death by 1,000 cost cuttings. So this is another reason I'm attracted. I mean, I don't mind paying a premium for a whisky like this. Small distillery, relatively new, authentic backstory, you know, the high unemployment in the community, they're looking for opportunities. They know that not only does it generate work at the distillery itself, it will attract visitors. It will give existing visitors to the island another reason to stop. And my goodness, when it comes to the north of Scotland, any economic advantage needs to be seized with both hands when you look at the carelessness of the political administration. And I'm not taking sides, I'm talking about the whole administration. It is what it is. Also, speaking to folk from Harris, because I have some friends and they speak passionately and enthusiastically. You can see that there is a warmth within the community towards this project. And I think a lot of it's to do with, and you've got to understand, Harris is a very Presbyterian environment, like Lewis. It's very Free Church of Scotland traditionally. You know, the swing parks would be locked on a Sunday because the Sunday was the Lord's Day, etc., etc. That still has a strong presence across the community, and the aversion to alcohol, the demon's drink, etc., it still to a certain extent persists. But with a younger generation in particular, there's more pragmatism. And I think at this point, I've said enough about the brand. Let's see what the whisky has to say for itself, because ultimately, that's where our money is going. Unpeated. Floral fragrant, slightly grain citrus, very pleasant on the nose, definitely good quality first fill ex-bourbon casks. You're getting that creaminess, that relative maturity for the age, but also the intact presence of the still delivered signature coming off the pot stills. It is fruity, no doubt about it, but there's a certain light perfume note as well, which never gets too big, too cloying and too invasive. Herbaceous, I'm getting celery notes. I'm getting soft pineapple notes, mild peach notes, apple, softest of gingers. Really, it's not even grated ginger, fresh ginger, it's or dried ginger, it's almost sushi ginger. Pickled ginger. First taste. Wonderfully creamy. The creaminess is coming from the barley. A delightful and complex citrus tang. Lemon rind. Grapefruit rind. Lime juice. This has got a lot of signature and a lot of character. And at such a young age, I have to say, I'm very impressed. Isle of Harris is really getting off the starting line quickly. I would put Isle of Harris on the first bottling, right, up there with Choravaig, Isle of Raasay, and Ardnamurchan. There you have it. Going to add a drop of water now, because we need a little bit of water in the whisky, just to slightly cut down the alcohol and open up the flavours. Let the flavours come out. So I'm looking at the versimetry. This is the awkward mixing of the alcohol and the added water. This gives me a sign that it's not chill filtered. It says very well, actually. The versimetry doesn't take long. The alcohol quickly assimilates the water. So that tells me there's not a lot of cask influence. The influence in this whisky is not coming so much from the oak of the bourbon casks, but from the residual previous content, which was bourbon. That's where we're at here. Softens the nose quite dramatically, actually. Now we're getting more of a confectionery light shortbread style of biscuitiness. The barley grain really comes through strongly, and I'm very impressed. What I'm looking for here is singularity. Is it like, what other whisky does this remind me of? And the answer is, it doesn't actually remind me of any other whisky. I've tasted whiskies similar, for example. Tam Novolen comes to mind. But this is... it's very promising. We roly-stroly round the glass. I'm looking at the coat line. I'm looking at the beading. I'm looking at the drops. Even with a young whisky malt mix, when we pour our first few glasses, with the first glass, just play around with it. Don't rush it. The second glass, really just enjoy it. Don't think too much about it. It's the third glass where we're really starting to explore it more, because we've allowed our subconscious smell and taste experience, to get acclimatised to it, so it's easier for us to pick out the smells and in particular the flavours. A mild and light eau de cologne note, so we're getting a touch of lavender, touch of rosemary. Aromatic, zesty, delightfully tangy, and one of the most impressive very young single malts I've had for quite a while. I'm really enjoying this, and I suspect that in a couple of years' time, because I'm spoiled for choice, but I suspect in a couple of years' time I'll come back and buy another bottle of this and just sit down with you for a review and put them side by side, because this is really well made single malt Scotch whisky, and this distillery is off to a really good start. And so I, in the bothy, will be keeping my eyes open to see how they progress, see how they pitch their prices, and see if perhaps if they get a broader base for the bottle, because it's a little bit, I mean, they must have accidents in the bottling line. There comes a point with bottles where style over function gets a little bit out of balance, and as you can see, there's very little that gets this bottle to unbalance. Meanwhile, let's give a nice balanced review. Maltmark. I like young whiskies, particularly as I get more experience with whiskey. I mean, it's coming up 40 years. I get used to the standard aged whiskies and I enjoy them and appreciate what they are. But when you've got young whiskies, if it's badly made, it goes horribly wrong. But when it's really well made, it gives you an authentic experience, which you don't get from standard whiskies. You really get a major insight into the signature from the still. It's in young whiskies that it is at its clearest before, due to aging, due to time in the casks, the cask influence starts to remodel, rework and recompose the single malt spirit into something that could be more complex, but even as it becomes more complex, as much as something's gained, something can get lost in the process. I enjoy the soft, lightly honeyed, vanillaed, green notes to this very youthful single malt. It really appeals to me. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, but this is not a bottle I will be rushing. I'm giving this 84 out of 100. You know that for a young whiskey, that's a pretty impressive mark. And the reason's simple. It's a very impressive young whiskey. Thank you for watching. I have completed my review, and if you want to join me shortly for review 1071, I shall just be riffing with my thoughts about whiskey at this moment in time, particularly Scotch whiskey, and just sharing what my thoughts actually are. What am I planning to review? What am I aspiring to buy at auction, for example? I'm going to talk about that. It's worth chatting about. See you soon.